Welcome to Walking Radio, a podcast dedicated to amplifying the voices of people on the margins and the front lines. This is a space where lived experience takes center stage, where stories are shared on their own terms, and where conversation happens in motion. On today's walk, we chat with Sandra, the co-executive director of the HIV Legal Network, on a stroll through Dufferin Grove Park in Toronto. It's Wednesday, November 12th, 2025. Along with over 30 years of fearless advocacy work across a broad range of important issues, the HIV Legal Network has been instrumental in providing support for the charter challenges to the recent closures of the supervised consumption sites in Ontario. We invite you to join us on our walk and to see what new pathways of better understanding we discover along the way. I'm Patrick Corvyn, and this is Walking Radio. Sometimes this little connection causes me some trouble. Actually, would you mind if we just go over that one more time?
Sure,
I don't think we'll really have to repeat anything again, but...
Nope.
Okay, so today it is November 12th, 2025, a very overcast day in Dufferin Grove Park in Toronto, and I am joined with the incomparable...
I'm Sandra co-executive director at the HIV Legal Network.
It's such an honor to walk with you today. I'm wondering, would you be comfortable just talking a little bit about the background of the HIV Legal Network?
Yeah. We were formed 33 years ago in 1992. A bunch of lawyers who were in Montreal at the time decided to get together and form a group. We were called the Canadian HIV/AIDS Legal Network at the time, to challenge some of the laws and policies that they saw were harming people living with HIV. And so we started in the AIDS activism movement, and we've evolved to touch on issues related to the rights of people who use drugs, the rights of people in prison, sex workers, and to us LGBTQ plus people.
It's such incredible work, and I know you've been deeply involved in all the issues surrounding the closures of the supervised consumption sites, starting with the Ford government's announcement last August 2024.
Yeah.
Would you be comfortable giving just a little bit of background about kind of the lay of the land right now? I know there's a lot of confusion still as to what's going on, where things stand legally and with the charter challenge, and what your role has been in that.
Yeah. So as your listeners might know, the Ford government announced last summer, in August 2024, that they were going to introduce new legislation that would prohibit any sites, supervised consumption services, from operating within 200 meters of a school, childcare center, daycare center. And it also prohibited municipalities and local boards, like the City of Toronto or City of Ottawa, from supporting supervised consumption services, very broadly worded. But I just also wanted to say, even prior to that, they were not funding a bunch of sites. So we know, for instance, in Sudbury, there was a site called The Spot, one of the only sites in Northern Ontario at the time that was just fundraising privately to keep their doors open. There were other sites in the province, and the Ford government said, no, we're not going to fund you, despite requests for applications that were sitting on their desk for years. So that's the background, and then August they announced this legislation. So they actually introduced it later that fall, and the legislation, called the Community Care and Recovery Act, was passed in December 2024. In the interim, after they announced the legislation, my organization, I know a lot of people were mobilizing against this law, knowing it was coming because they announced it. And we're speaking with service providers across the province saying, would you be interested in litigating? Because we know this government, they passed this law without any public debate. They just whipped it through the assembly. It was passed despite huge outcry from the public and service providers saying that it would cause incredible harm to people who use drugs. In December, the law was passed. A group stepped forward called the Neighborhood Group Community Services, based in Kensington Market. They operate an overdose prevention site there, and they decided to challenge the law on the basis of the Charter and the Constitution.
Along with two individual co-applicants.
Yes, sorry, JP Aubry and Katie Resendez. Katie was a former and service user of KMOPS, the site in Kensington Market, and JP was accessing a site in Kitchener.
Amazing. And what has the HIV Legal Network's role been in all of that? I wasn't sure, you're involved in the Charter Challenge directly, or providing support to the neighborhood
Yeah,
group?
I think we were providing support. I know from speaking with TNG, for instance, it was the first time immersed in litigation of this sort. So connecting the organization TNG with legal counsel. In fact, one of the lawyers on the case was someone I had known previously through their intervention in a case called Insight, the PHS decision from 2011. So
in Vancouver.
Yeah, he was an intervener. He was a lawyer in one of the cases. So it was just sort of providing support behind the scenes, and the legal network, along with the HIV/AIDS Legal Clinic of Ontario, HALCO, intervened in the case ultimately.
Was that the case was decided that, like, similarly on a Charter Challenge, but with the Insight, I think that was like the original decision that upheld the charter rights of the people who use Insight? Is
That's
that
right?
kind of...
It was the Vancouver Downtown Eastside site that was run by Portland Hotel Society, PHS, Insight, and in that case, the Supreme Court of Canada recognized for the first time in the history of our case law in Canada that supervised consumption services provide healthcare, essential healthcare that saves people's lives. And they said that the federal minister's decision at the time to keep it shut or shut it down was unconstitutional.
So this is a great point then, is like, how, in the wake of that decision, how can the Ford government be allowed to proceed with these closures?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? I guess they're arguing there's this objective of the new law that they're trying to protect, quote, community safety. They want to protect children. That's a lot of the discourse that surrounded the case. So they can, in the charter, you can balance the rights of one group against another and decide which one outweighs, which harms outweighs the benefits, etc. So that's just a lot of the things they were saying, that the law, people can still keep these sites open. You just have to privately fundraise for it. Obviously, the government won't pay for them. You can keep these sites open as long as they're more than 200 meters away. You can do all these things and jump through all these hurdles to try to keep the sites open. We're not the source of the harm.
Right. And it occurred to me just a couple of weeks ago, the irony of that, in light of this recent push by the Ford government to remove the speed cameras out of school zones, which their own cabinet ministers were caught speeding through.
Yeah.
So to me, it kind of reeks of hypocrisy that they point to children's safety as the reason, while they're, to my mind, a much clearer direct potential jeopardy to children's safety.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, a lot of the discourse was about why seeing people in distress, why seeing people who use drugs in distress is harmful. But I think you really need to question the idea of what is unsafe versus what is uncomfortable. Sure, there are a lot of people who use the services and some of them congregate outside, but the solution is not to shut them down. And people are using outside for a reason. Maybe they don't have access to safer inhalation inside, which we know a lot of the sites in Ontario don't. There's, I think, one Casey House which offers that service.
Yeah, the only one in Canada, I think.
There are some others, but
there's in Ontario. Sorry.
Only one in Ontario. And then also there's maybe just not enough capacity. There's a lot of reasons why people are doing that. And I think it's really, when I think about all the legislation that's been passed over the past 6 months to a year related to people use drugs, and people talk about public safety, I think, where do people want people to go? Do they just want them to, they just think they'll disappear. But I don't think, obviously that's not going to happen. And that sort of relates to another development with the Parkdale site being forced to close soon.
Yeah, and I saw the HIV Legal Network published a really amazing statement on that, really strong language about the Parkdale closure. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Sure.
I think it's atrocious. People are going to the Parkdale site because all the other sites in Toronto have been shut down. Not all of them. Many of them have been shut down. There's nothing other than the KMOP site that was kept open because of the injunction in the court case.
KMOP is Kensington Market Overdose Prevention site?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So people are going to the Parkdale site. It's this one of the few, it's the only site now in the West End. And the neighbors complained. I know there was a concerted campaign to shut it down. And it was an easy target to just shut down the site and defund it. Even though it's not It doesn't contravene the rules of the new law. It was just a funding decision.
It is, I'm kind of speechless. Something you said a little earlier, this argument, not wanting children to see people in distress. I think that kind of mimics a broader issue of people just not wanting to face reality. It's almost like you said, that just this desire to somehow you can just make the problem disappear or make people vanish to some imaginary, I don't know, alternate universe.
Right.
Where are they supposed to go? What is the plan? It's almost as if the government just doesn't think the next step or play the tape forward.
Yeah, I agree. You see that we're in Dufferin Grove Park now. We're just talking about encampments. There's not enough housing in the city, affordable, sustained housing. There's not enough health services. Now there was another, the new law that was passed, a Bill 6 legislation that allows law enforcement to tell people to get off public spaces, including if they're in their tents, if they're using drugs, and tell them to go somewhere. But where are they going to go? And if they don't abide by this, directive to leave, then they're going to be fined or put in jail. So I think people think they'll go to jail and then they'll just be happy again because they don't have to see visible poverty or mental health issues or drug use. But that's not a solution to root causes of these issues, right?
Yeah, I know HIV Legal Network's done amazing work. I saw some of your reports, the Hard Times Persist reports. I saw you were a co-author on that. It's incredible work. And it seems to me like it's so much a part, it seems to me, of conservative mindset that we can just incarcerate our way through complex problems.
Yeah.
But when I think about the current state of the carceral system in the province of Ontario, it is crumbling. It is way over capacity. We're in the midst of the wake of the really atrocious event that happened at Maplehurst that has really undermined the judicial system even. Would you be interested in sort of talking about what role the prison system serves in this greater landscape and what alternatives there might be to trying to incarcerate our way through this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an abolitionist, so I don't think that there's any, personally, I'm an abolitionist.
Part of a proud tradition.
But I don't think it has any role to play. I mean, I think there are far more meaningful responses to any of the crises we see, like the homelessness crisis, the toxic drug crisis. We were actually in the federal system a few weeks ago. It was my first time visiting a health fair in years. I felt a little bit detached from it, and I wanted to go visit some people inside. And you talk to people, and no one comes, everyone there has a story, and the story is usually not a great one. And addressing it through incarcerating them where they don't have decent access to health services or even nutritious food, any of the things people need to thrive and be well, it's not a response to any of the issues we see. And if we're thinking dollars and cents, it's also a very expensive response to the problem, if you see it as a problem, when we don't invest in things that actually have been shown to work, like access to housing, access to health services, access to harm reduction, access to decent income. It's all those things that we know work and it would actually be more cost effective. I think the prison system is wildly stupid response to any of the issues that we are trying to deal with today.
My mind is floating to the image of Queen's Park right now, which I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with this, but George Brown, one of the so-called fathers of Confederation, his statue stands in front of Queen's Park. He was a fierce prison reformist. He was fiercely critical of the prison system at the time and the atrocities and abuses that were occurring there.
Yeah.
I see with the many clients I've served over the years, there is just this revolving door of between the streets and the jail and back and forth to really no one's benefit.
Yeah.
It often ends up putting them at far greater harm when they do come out of jail, because even though, drugs are available in jail, they get smuggled in, but a lot of them come out with very, very low tolerance. So they're kind of like reset to baseline.
Yeah.
And then they go and use their like customary dose of opioids. And then that's when they're just at extremely high risk of overdose. And you see it very frequently.
Yeah. I mean, I think we just did a report on the impact of drug offenses, policing drug offenses in this province, and universally everyone said, and you know this more than anybody when you work with the people you work with, is that it's massively destabilizing. Like, if you held down a job, now you have to go see someone every day, your parole officer, probation officer, you lose access to your housing if you're in the system, right? Everything just changes. It's all for the worse. And if we want people to have well-being, like, incarceration is just the worst thing for it. It's the absolute opposite response. And like you said, we in prison, the hard time persists report you just mentioned, there aren't adequate access to harm reduction services inside. So you might have an overdose inside, and there's not immediate access to naloxone or support outlet and emergency response, or you might be using drugs inside and you might get HIV or hepatitis C because harm reduction services aren't equivalent. And then when you leave, if you're tolerant, like you said, you're at a higher risk of toxic drug death.
Yeah, that's a good lead into the topic of hepatitis C, massively disproportionate amount of exposure to Hep C that happens in prison. It kind of leads into what the whole point of harm reduction is, more generally speaking, is to reduce or eliminate the transmission of bloodborne illnesses.
Yeah.
So, especially hepatitis C and HIV, which this current government, they are prohibiting the distribution of harm reduction material, almost guaranteeing a significant uptick in the spread of HIV and hepatitis C.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense. These are proven public health measures. We know so maybe I'll just going back to the announcement in August 2024 when they said we're going to close these sites down. We're going to transform them into or create alternative spaces called heart hubs, homelessness, addiction, treatment, recovery. I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but heart hubs. And they ban needle and syringe distribution at these heart hubs. A proven harm reduction measure, public health measure that's actually enshrined in the public health guidelines of this province.
Yeah, it's a cornerstone.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I mean, you see it in prison. They don't have decent access to harm reduction, but now we're seeing it proliferate, these ideas of harm reduction being an endorsement of drug use, and we want to move people away from drug use and, quote, recovery and treatment and abstinence. Not only in Ontario, but we're seeing it across the country right now. And we're going backwards in a really troubling way.
Yeah, I remember, earlier in this year when what I assumed was going to be a hard switchover on April 1st. I mean, it never occurred to me that there wouldn't be a smooth transition. Right. But instead what happened was they closed down a bunch of the supervised consumption sites without any of very, very few of these heart hubs starting. Yeah. And very few of them are in place right now, it's my understanding. That's my understanding too. Yeah. Yeah, the landscape is very confusing, but there's definitely no smooth handoff. No. So the reality is that there's been months of just this massive gap in life-saving services where people are just kind of unmoored from the supports that they've been relying on for years.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the beautiful things about harm reduction is building those relationships, trust. It's low barrier. There's no need for people to abstain from drug use if they don't want to. It's just meeting people where they are, I think, is one of the sort of radical approaches that harm reduction I so appreciate. And those relationships get really severed when you lose those services. And the perverse part about that is okay, so we don't have heart hubs. People are going to the other sites that are still operating, like Parkdale. They're going to K-MOPS, the Kensington site. They're going to Casey House. But when there's more people accessing those sites beyond their capacity and maybe milling around outside the sites, then they're getting blamed for it. And I think that's really troubling because there's clearly a need that's not being met, exactly what you said. But yet when the people are going to what exists now, the meager services that do exist, they're being blamed for having people use their service.
Yeah. And those relationships, they take so long to build. I find many of the people who I've worked with over the years, they have very understandably a mistrust and a guardedness about using any kind of service because they carry so much trauma from past experiences.
Yeah.
So that trust in those relationships are very hard won.
Yeah.
And I think of things like what we were talking about earlier before we started recording about like the clearing at Trinity Bellwood, these really aggressive, almost paramilitary operations that the governments are using, and now the closures of these sites. Like all of that is so damaging to those hard-won relationships, and that bedrock of trust that is gained so slowly and so carefully over so much time.
Yeah.
To me, it's just so disheartening, so tragic.
I mean, I wonder if we could turn the question to you, like in the work you do as a harm reduction, someone who works in harm reduction, like when you have seen the impact of these sites close, how do you stay connected with a patient or client who is not coming anymore?
I don't. For me, it's a little bit different because I kind of stepped away before the announcement of the closures.
Okay.
It was like unrelated, but so I still do see some of the clients through other means, like through my nursing work, but that's just like by happenstance. Otherwise, it's like I have no further connection. I have no way of contacting. It really wouldn't be appropriate for me to go searching for them either.
Yeah.
But it leaves a really huge gap in my heart because, I mean, not only so many of us who work in the field, we have to process such an extreme level of loss.
Yeah.
And I think it's different from a lot of other areas of healthcare where you're sort of seeing people in a kind of transient, like very occasional, infrequent means, or in an emergency situation and witness death and cope with death and that. But in harm reduction settings, like I was saying, you build up these relationships over years, and many of these folks you see more than your own friends and family. You see them daily and get to know them and care about them.
And I assume they're coming there because you're there. Like, I don't go see my family doctor. She just happened to be my family doctor, but I'm assuming you have those relationships. They're coming to you because they trust you, Patrick. And then now they don't have. I mean, it's really tragic. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, it's obviously not just me; it's the whole team. But sometimes I did kind of wonder if folks were coming there. Like sometimes people would come into a booth, and it was clear that they were not even really there to use. I think they just wanted the warmth.
Yeah, and
just the contact.
Yeah.
It's meaningful. It's central to our existence. I think it's central to what it is to be a human being.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's those connections that are being intentionally severed and destroyed by these policies.
Yeah. It's
devastating.
I mean, I know there's researchers now who are tracking the impact of the closures in Ontario, but I know we talked to some folks in Alberta, for instance. Sites there have also closed, and I talked to doctors and nurses who know that their patients have died because they no longer have access to the site. They have been able to track and stay in touch with some, and so I think it's going to be a really, I mean, it's already happening. People are probably dying now as a result of these closures.
Yeah, that brings up another good point too, is like the nature of it. It's always been the nature of it that when you stop seeing a client, you never know why that is.
Yeah.
There's a part of you that hopes maybe they no longer have a need for the service, maybe they've moved on to something else they're no longer using, or they're at a different site or something. But in many cases, it's left ambiguous.
Yeah.
And you know that there's always that very real possibility and potential likelihood that it's because they've died of an overdose.
Right.
And now in this situation where the whole system is being dismantled, so many of us are just going to be left with this unknowing, this uncertainty, how many of the people we've cared for over the years are gone.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the really gross things about this new legislation, going back to Ford's legislation, the Community Care and Recovery Act. There was a media story that leaked that their own lawyers looked at the legislation prior to being introduced, and they said this law will likely violate the charter and people will die, and Black and Indigenous people will be disproportionately affected by this, and the Ford government just passed it anyway. Like, they had their own legal advice from their lawyers, and so that, I think that just speaks to the heartlessness of this government. There's certain people obviously don't care about, and they will leave them to die if it means appealing to a certain vision of community or public safety.
Yeah. Because it's not only have they just outrightly refused to do any consultation or listen to any experts, any of us who have worked in the field for decades. There's combined amongst all these organizations doing all this incredible work, there's like centuries of like person hours that have of experience working on the front lines directly with folks and advocating on these issues, and none of that has meant anything to this government.
Yeah.
And then also, like what you're saying, their own internal advisors and public health agencies and medical officer of health, their own lawyers have told them that this is a terrible idea.
Yeah. Our own chief medical officer of health, Dr. Karen Moore, it was a year or two ago, and you saw his report. He recommended scaling up these services.
And the Auditor General?
Yes, that's right. And that was obviously ignored. And so now we've seen, more than half of the sites in this province have been shut down. And I expect it's just the first wave. Like, I don't think they're intent on stopping here. I think the idea is to eventually shut them all down and move towards this Alberta, I call it the Alberta Recovery Abstinence Harm Model. And maybe we will see things like we're seeing in Saskatchewan. Just announced yesterday they're going to introduce forced treatment legislation. Manitoba just introduced forced detention for people who are intoxicated. BC did this. Like, we're seeing this wave of legislation, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ontario would be. It's already moving in that direction. So I think it's just a start. Yeah.
That reminds me of the very first interview I did for this podcast with Dr. Cheryl Forchuk from University of what's it called now? Western University.
Okay, yeah.
Talking about how, does it really make sense to force people into treatment when we don't even have the spaces available for the people who want treatment, like who are on these extensive wait lists?
Yeah.
There's just so little of any of this that makes any sense from a legal, logical, ethical, moral standpoint.
Precisely, yeah.
And so for me, it is so hard for me to escape the feeling, I try to have a charitable mindset about these things, but I contemplate all of this stuff a lot, and it touches me closely and touches my heart. It's very hard for me to escape the idea that there isn't just a certain contempt that is motivating these policies and these actions. Contempt for people living on the margins, people living in poverty, people who use substances. It's hard for me to explain it any other way.
Yeah, I used to think it was ignorance, and then I started creeping on some group neighborhood chats about the sites and harm reduction, and I absolutely agree. It's just contempt for people who you don't know and you consider lesser than human. In the case itself, you had private investigators that the Ontario government paid millions of dollars, I can't remember, it was a significant amount to hire for the case, taking pictures of people in great distress or videos and submitting that as evidence in the case. And and we saw that happen in South Riverdale, neighbors taking photos of people who are in physical distress. Like, where's the humanity? Like, it's just complete loss. And the language that they use in these neighborhood chats to describe people who use drugs or people who are homeless is just reprehensible, but people don't feel scared to say it anymore. And it's just, I don't know, it makes me feel very sad and hopeless sometimes.
Yeah, I forgot about those private investigations. I think Toronto Public Health Works, I think they were subject to that same undercover nonsense.
Yeah, they had pictures of people outside in the Kensington area too, outside different of the sites. And I mean, I would talk to a colleague, he's like, go outside any bar on a Friday or Saturday night and you'd see similar pictures of people who are maybe not, they're intoxicated. But we're not. Anyway, I mean, talk back to this point about hypocrisy. Like, we're making alcohol, for instance, more freely accessible in this province.
Yeah, that was like one of the hallmarks of Doug Ford's premiership from the outset.
Yes. Yet we're taking away healthcare services for people who need it. So it's hypocrisy at its worst, and contempt for people. I mean, obviously, we don't have contempt for people who use alcohol, but we have contempt for people who use drugs in this province.
Yeah, and there's another messed up layer to all this too. When I think of, it feels like yesterday, but should we go down this way?
Sure. Yeah.
It was May. I just revisited this article. It was May 25th, 2013. The Globe and Mail.
Yeah.
The result of 18 months of investigative research by Greg MacArthur and a bunch of other Globe and Mail reporters. That showed Doug Ford himself back in the 80s in Etobicoke was the go-to man for hashish.
Okay.
That he was the drug dealer in the neighborhood, and that all of his siblings were also implicated in drug trafficking.
Yeah.
And then you fast forward to obviously all of the stuff that happened around Rob with the crack smoking scandal.
Yeah.
And Doug, to his credit, was such a fierce defender of Rob at that point. And I think in many ways did demonstrate really genuine compassion and loyalty and understanding around Rob's drug use. Even at a time when Rob was encountering just relentless global ridicule, and even City of Toronto was the butt of every joke on late night television.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
And like we just said, this whole buck of beer thing being what launched Doug Ford's premiership campaign, and it's nice to be on quieter streets. And then he has successfully brought beer and alcohol, liquor, into grocery stores and convenience stores.
Yep.
So he clearly doesn't have an intrinsic moral qualm with substance use itself.
Yeah. I think it depends. To me, it's sort of that reflects when the pendulum started swinging towards more progressive drug policy. We saw groups pop up like Mom Stop the Harm. Yeah. Because suddenly it was middle-class white kids who were getting affected by the toxic drug crisis, and they were dying or being overdosing from the supply. And so it became, even I remember 2 or 3 years ago, Erin O'Toole, who was then conservative leader, said, we don't want to use a criminal law to respond to people's drug use. And that was a wow moment. Wow, it's really swung in a way where people understand this as not a criminal law response framework. We don't want that. And I think, but now again, when going back to when you describe contempt, people who are in the COVID years and following that, who are living on the margins, who no longer look like your middle class white person using drugs, or Doug Ford or Rob Ford. It's okay now to vilify them and put them away in jail and never look at them again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're up here. Do you want to go back?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we've been kind of going in circles, which is just fine.
I'm going this way.
Okay, yeah, perfect, yeah. That brings to my mind the role that residents associations, tenants associations, homeowners associations play in all of this, and have always played through all this. To me, from my days of outreach and working in harm reduction, so many of those associations, to my mind, become so weaponized against homeless people, people experiencing homelessness, in really grotesque, I think monstrous ways. Yeah. I remember one time being invited to a walk along I don't think I'll get in trouble for disclosing this, but it was with Kristen Wong-Tam.
Okay.
And the the city police.
Yeah.
And it was the South Cabbagetown Residents Association.
Okay.
Walking through the back alleys around that area around Dundas and Sherbourne. With their typical frothed up concerns about the existence of poor people in their neighborhood.
Right.
And I very distinctly remember that one of the recommendations they put forward without any sense of self-awareness
Right.
was that the city really needed to weld shut this fire escape because and at the back of the Dan Harrison TCHC building, because that's what poor people were using to enter and exit the building.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Weld shut a fire escape.
Yeah.
To me, that it was just so emblematic of where people's minds are at sometimes.
Yeah.
That they really do view fellow human beings as subhuman.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the irony also, when you talk, I don't know so much about the history of Cabbagetown, but I know when I was supporting TNG with the case, we're looking at the affidavits from South Riverdale, and there was a resident group that got together and said, we hate the site and we want it shut down. And there's also one near the Bathurst supervised consumption site. And they all described this neighborhood and the site of people who were using drugs or homeless as something as if it was new. It was as if they didn't exist in this neighborhood. And we talked to a bunch of people who provided counter affidavits. And we're like, we've been living here for 20, 30 years. South Riverdale has always had people who use drugs, people living on the streets. None of this is new. You were the ones who came here and made it different. Yeah. You've gentrified the neighborhood. You have your $1 million gym. I think there's a spin cycle that one of the Athians, owns, and you were the ones who made it different, rather. And so your property value obviously is more important than human life in this case. I think it's really not even hidden, their agenda. So I don't know if in Cabbagetown if it's similar, but I know in Parkdale, for instance, I don't live far from Parkdale. It's not as, the condo people who are upset about seeing people in distress. Parkdale, you know the history of Parkdale. That's Parkdale.
Yeah.
You're the ones who came and are changing the face of Parkdale, which is really upsetting because it's not, for all the reasons.
I say exactly the same thing about my neighborhood, Moss Park.
Okay.
I've recently got involved in my tenants association for, thank God it's still a fairly new tenants association. They haven't been totally brought over to the dark side yet.
Yeah.
So I think there's still hope, and I think it speaks to the importance of getting involved if you can, if you can stomach it, getting involved in these associations to prevent them from becoming these cruel instruments.
Yeah.
But this is exactly the point I was making at the recent meeting. It's this neighborhood has been mired in poverty. It's one of the lowest income neighborhoods around for 50 or 60 years.
Yeah.
You knew this coming. I was joking with my friend last night. When they came to see the apartment, did someone kidnap them, put a hood over them, and bring them in a white van?
Yeah.
Surely you saw the level of poverty when you came to view your apartment 2 years ago.
So are you saying the tenants in your neighborhood now are trying to mobilize against?
No, luckily,
Okay.
I'm saying that there's still hope.
Okay.
Because it's still a new tenants association.
Okay.
So I'm trying to quietly bring a little bit of ethics, and
Good.
and they
Awesome.
do seem responsive.
Yeah.
I think it's just important to have a voice at the table that keeps people in check when their minds start just almost so predictably and reflexively drifting towards social Darwinism.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. The social Darwinism. We want people to disappear. I have actually a colleague. They call it the put the swing set on it policy, where you just, if you want all the health services for people on the margins to disappear, put a swing set within 200 meters of it, and they'll you won't have any more health services for marginalized people in the city anymore, because the children. I mean, there were some beautiful affiants, people, affiants and affidavit providers, affiants in the South Riverdale case who talked about how much safer they felt when they knew that there was a hub, a center that provided services for people who were not doing great, and that having their children witness this made them feel safer. Like, I thought it was a really beautiful way to subvert this idea that seeing people who are living in poverty is dangerous. Yeah, I thought that was a great counterpoint. Hopefully the judge agrees.
Yeah. That brings another important point too, is like how self-defeating this notion of the closures is, and just like how wrong-headed the logic is that there's this idea that by closing them, you're going to, like, the problem's going to vanish.
Exactly.
And it's going to protect people from the harms of drug use. But really all that's going to happen, and has started happening, is that it will just drive substance use and the supplies that go along with that, just driving that out further into public view. So there will be much more public substance use.
Yeah.
There'll be, even more importantly, there will be overdoses happening on sidewalks more than there are now. And it will be up to the public to respond, many of whom have no idea what to do, and are probably unprepared for the reality of watching a human being die in front of them when they are powerless because they're paralyzed with fear.
That's a great point. I think that was also a point that some of the affiants made supportive of the site. Like, it would cause me far greater concern and fear if people were to have a overdose in front of me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to take them. I didn't know who to call. Like, the South Riverdale site, for instance, was not only doing harm reduction with supervised consumption service work in the site, like, they're also doing needle pickups. Like, they're picking up paraphernalia, equipment in the neighborhood. Like, they're doing a lot more than just what was contained within the physical site. So the idea that these things will go away, I'm certain that the research will show is not going to happen, and there will be more troubling. You know, if you're concerned about the sight of people using drugs in public, I suspect there will be more sites of that. Yeah.
And important point you just made, like the idea of safe disposal of especially needles.
Yeah.
That is what happens at these sites. People go inside, they dispose of the needles safely in a biohazard sharps container. That's not going to happen if you ban the very sites that have the means to dispose of this equipment safely.
Yeah. I also wanted to pick up on a point you raised about people coming to the service just because they wanted to chat or have a warm place to be. Like, I think that's another thing that I'm finding increasingly with the work, like, the more I've been immersed in this work, like, isolation to me is the most dangerous thing. Whether it's for people who use drugs, I work with people who do sex work. When you're isolated, you are more likely, obviously, to not survive a toxic drug event, or you don't have access to services, or someone could target you for violence, like all the things. And so when you close all these services, close all these sites, people will become increasingly isolated and obviously incur a lot of the harms that will come from isolation.
Absolutely. And we just end up back where we started, with people overdosing in McDonald's washrooms and Tim Hortons washrooms. And I think of the young people working for minimum wage who will inevitably come across corpses at a time in their life where they are not prepared for that. And that will set them up for potentially, like, extremely difficult psychological long-term consequences of that site. Of, like, stumbling upon something like that. It's just the likelihood of that skyrockets.
I think anybody who works in a public-facing, like, entity, like, be it the library or Tim Hortons or wherever, is now going to be a de facto overdose prevention worker. That's my impression.
Yeah.
Is this Bloor? Are we at Bloor Street? No.
Yeah, it's Bloor,
wow. We walked all the way from Bloor.
Yeah. Where to?
Do you want to double back?
Yeah, sure.
Noisy?
Yeah,
Okay.
That's perfect.
Okay. I'm going to go on this side.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, this works well. I don't have to switch hands. Well, we have covered a lot of territory already. This has been awesome. There's one important question I wanted to ask is, so in light of what appears to be widespread indifference, if not quiet endorsement of monstrous policy, and the people of Ontario just voted in the third straight majority, Doug Ford's government. For folks like us, I think it's very disheartening. It has so drastically changed my perception of who the people are that I live around. Of like, what is the soul of this province and this country? Is this a caring country at all? Is this a compassionate country? I think there's still lots of people who do care. I think it's very easy, as we see in the States, the extraordinary damage that Donald Trump has done to the body politic down there. I think of the ways in which Doug Ford rose to power riding on the wave of Trump populism, and how closely he embraced that ethos at the beginning. Even after the Access Hollywood tape, I remember.
No, it's funny. My partner, every time Trump would do something spectacularly bad, my partner would be like, this is the end. This is the end. People will see, and then he'll be out of power. And I was like, every single time, he's gone further and further and further to test the limits, and it's still the same. Although I hear his numbers are falling a little bit now. Yeah,
they are slipping. And of course, Doug Ford has somehow weaseled his way into positioning himself as some kind of opponent to Donald Trump. But in my mind, they are cut from exactly the same cloth. But if we are living in a time in history where we cannot rely on our fellow electors to exercise some kind of conscience or demonstrate care about the most vulnerable members of our society. I mean, they handed this majority knowing that this bill had just been passed that is probably going to lead to thousands of preventable, predictable deaths. In the absence of a fulsome response from the electorate, what are are there any checks and balances? Can we rely on the judicial system? Is there anything that can give us hope?
I think there's glimmers of hope in the legal system, although I'm quite disillusioned by it as well, because the laws are just made by humans, and humans are intrinsically imperfect and also stigmatizing of people who look different from them. So we have an injunction in the case, right? There's an injunction. The judge did see that there could be, it met the legal test, potential irreparable harm incurred by people who use the services. So he recognized that. So I think the legal system might provide an imperfect and partial response. In some cases, it depends on your judge too. I was recently involved in a case where the judge was a former prosecutor, and I think very much held up the values of the criminal legal system as good, and we want to uphold them and defend them, etc. So I think it depends on the judge, but I think there's some potential avenues, but I don't know. I mean, what you're doing here and talking to people, and I think just sharing with people, I still think that there are, like you said, pockets of people who are not contemptuous and maybe just don't know enough or don't care, but if they might be brought to care. This homelessness and toxic drugs are affecting all of us now, in personal ways for all of us. I think that's when the pendulum starts swinging. And I'm hoping just having conversations with people. Research, I think, is another big one. I think if people don't believe with their own eyes what they're seeing, the harms that we say are going to happen, if there's some research that can document it and bring it forward to maybe in the future more progressive policymakers, the courts really rely on research to make their decisions. If they see, there's a very famous case called Bedford. It's a sex work case in 2014, and the Supreme Court of Canada, 2013, the Supreme Court of Canada said, if one person is harmed by this law, that's enough to grant a charter violation. So researchers are looking at that now. They're seeing whether or not it will withstand a second part of the legal test is another question, but it does mean that there's a basis on which to argue that the law should be struck down. So I think maybe the legal system has some glimmers of hope. Depends on the judge and the panel you see. Researchers, people like you talking about it. I mean, what do you think? I don't know. I'm sometimes at a loss because I think we're moving.
I was hoping you would know.
I don't know. If I knew I could quit this job and we could just fold the HIV Legal Network, we wouldn't have to do this work anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think when people ask me what's the answer?
Yeah.
I really have to go way upstream.
Yeah.
There is no Band-Aid solution. We have to start with just a much stronger baseline of compassion
Yeah.
towards all living beings.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can't even extend that to our own fellow human beings, we're in really serious trouble.
Yes. Yeah.
I think a lot has to do with the fact that we live in an economic system that we've all agreed to
Yeah.
or been born into, that just favors competition and rewards viewing other human beings as your enemy. And then couple that with the last decade of increasingly divisive and cruel political rhetoric, and a populace that has rewarded that.
Yeah. I see some sparks of hope in young people. I don't know if that makes... I just sound like an old person now, but I went to our whole family went to Abolition Pride over the summer, and it's just all these young people who are creating beautiful art, doing activism in all different ways. And I was so inspired. I was I hope my kids who are 11 now, this is the world that they'll be born into. They have been born into, and hopefully they have that circle of love, and people who are care. And I don't know if you see that, just as the younger generation, maybe they'll save us.
Yeah, I just in my day-to-day life, I don't really have any connection with the younger generation, unfortunately. But when I do, I am inspired.
Yeah.
And I'm not really on any social media, so I don't really see that either. But it warms my heart to hear what you're saying.
It was beautiful, and we were maybe we have some hope. If these are our future leaders, then we have some hope.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to encourage that. I remember in my childhood, rural Ontario in the 80s and 90s, there just wasn't really anything to encourage that spark, really.
Right.
Or if anything, if you expressed kind of progressive ideas, it was often just immediately squashed. So I think the more we can do to foster that innate sense of compassion and courage, I think you're right.
What you're doing with the Tenants Association is that. It's precisely that. You're going to be having conversations with your fellow residents about the issue in a way that maybe they haven't thought about before.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it doesn't have to be aggressive or hostile.
Yeah.
I think just the act of offering a different perspective, it can just change the mindset and change the climate within a group setting.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Oh, there was one other point I wanted to touch on with the Charter Challenge.
Yeah.
Do I have this right, that it's on the basis of it violates the right to life, liberty, and security of the person?
Yeah. They advanced several charter claims, but the two main ones were the Section 7, the life, liberty, security of the person, which was successful in the Insight case. And they also said it's a Section 15 violation, that's the right to equality and non-discrimination, because the people who will be disproportionately affected are people who have substance use quote disorder, people who are disproportionately racialized, Indigenous, women will also be affected. So they advanced those two main claims. They also said something which I think is interesting, that it's out of the scope of Ontario to do this. It's a criminal law power, that's a federal law power, and Ontario's exceeding its jurisdiction by legislating in this way. If they win on this ground, which I hope they do, it would mean the Ford government can come back and invoke the notwithstanding clause. Because you can invoke the notwithstanding clause in the charter, which is notwithstanding that you're violating the charter rights of people, you can do that for up to 5 years and then review, etc. It's being invoked across the land, as you know, in a lot of cases involving trans people, other people on the margins. But if they win on the constitutional grounds, then there's nothing to invoke. Like, that would just mean, Ontario, you can't legislate in this way. Bug off. It's a federal power. So I hope they win on all grounds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I keep wondering if this is found to be unconstitutional, like, is there any hope of accountability or responsibility? Or like, there are times when I feel like I'm watching a crime against humanity unfold.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to lead to widespread death. And I think there's been something like, well, over 1,000 new deaths since around the time Sylvia Jones said no one's going to die because of this.
Right.
I mean, this seems like a policy clearly, if not intentionally engineered to passively kill people, it is leading to death. Like, is there any like possible recrimination or like accountability that could be sought after the dust settles on all this?
I mean, I suppose legally you could pretend there are some cases where you can seek damages for charter violations. There's not a lot of cases around that. I don't think it's a commonly accepted route, but I guess it's possible also for someone who's been personally affected, like say a family member of someone who has died could potentially sue the Ford government for something they've knowingly put people in harm's way. That's another avenue. The sad part, I think, about the case is that even if they win on every single ground, that doesn't stop this government from defunding everything. So I think we need to keep mobilizing is what my point. Like, even no matter what happens with a court case, we need to keep pushing this government to fund these services. And that could be an option. Like, people saying, like, if they get sued into oblivion and saying, like, you caused my loved one's death. I don't know. I haven't thought about it. But it could be maybe an option.
I like that option.
Yes. Yeah.
Actually, this is a really important point too. Is and almost like one of the main reasons I wanted to reach out to you at the beginning is like, and we've touched on this so far, but I'm wondering if you can provide clarity around like why is it that we had this incredible moment. Like at the 11th hour at the end of March this year, where the injunction came, and it felt like this, like climax of the film. Like, we won. We stopped the closures. There's this injunction. It was shown to be a violation of charter rights, and then everything shut down anyways. Are you able to talk about that?
The judge called everyone back to say, "What happened? Like, I thought my injunction was going to do stuff," and what I'm seeing in the news, it was like all the sites shut down anyway. You probably already know this. A lot of the sites converted to heart hubs. And one of the conditions of heart hubs is you can't do supervised consumption services at your heart hub. And I know it was a really, really painful choice for a lot of organizations to make. You probably know some of that. Like, either we keep going without any funding and providing services for people we love and care about, or we convert to in this imperfect. They all said, I think, agreed that the heart hub model is imperfect and obviously didn't even get off the ground. And a lot of the organizations took the second approach. K-MOPS, which is privately funded, did not go the heart hub route. That's why they kept their doors open with the injunction. And there's one other site I know that is privately fundraising. But if you don't have access to provincial dollars, I think people just made that difficult decision. We'll keep our doors open and convert to a heart hub.
Yeah. Otherwise, it was like, at that point, it was too late.
Well, I mean, there's also, I know, a lot of anger within community for that decision. Like, some people said you should have just kept the door open, privately fundraised. Like, the heart hubs are useless. Like, there's a lot of anger, too. And I also understand that perspective.
Yeah, totally.
But that's why some of them, there was only, most of them closed anyway.
Yeah. I had this image that emerged in my mind yesterday of, like, a metaphor for what's going on. It's like, if you think of the opioid crisis as this great fire that is like blazing across North America, it's as if in Ontario the decision to address that fire that's costing many, many lives, thousands of lives, the solution is to like spend $500 million repainting all the fire trucks.
Yes.
And then demolishing the water supply.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. Another one I've heard is like supervised consumption services if you are actually interested in treatment and recovery and well-being for people, they provide a door for people to enter a space where you build those relationships. And now you created another thing without a door. Like it's just, there's no entry point now. And so how effective will they be?
Yeah, and like the purported purpose of the heart hubs too, like so many of those services were already in place.
Yeah.
Like supervised consumption sites were the hub for people to access treatment and referral to services.
Exactly.
So WTF?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it's like, it's just discursive. Like if you call safe supply, for instance, treatment, then maybe people will be okay with it. If you call a supervised consumption service a heart hub.
Yeah.
Taking away the supervised consumption. Yeah. Like it's just the way we describe things. I think there's so much stigma around certain terms that are meant to support people who use drugs.
Yeah, it's so unclear what their concept of treatment is. To me at this point, is it forced treatment? Is it strapping people to beds? Or is it 12-step? Like
I don't know.
Nobody knows.
Yeah, nobody knows. You've probably talked to people who work at the heart hubs. I've talked to a handful, and it's very, people don't know like what this government's conception of it is.
That's wild. And here we are months into this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's we've covered a lot of territory.
We have. We walked Dufferin Grove Park.
Are there any questions that you wish I had asked? Or any points you want to touch on? I mean, I would love to carry on this conversation in the future again.
I don't think so. I think we've covered a lot. Yeah, maybe it would be interesting to see what happens with this decision. I'm sure it'll go to appeal. I'm sure neither side, I'm hoping TNG doesn't back down. I'm sure the Ontario government won't back down. So I think it's going to set a precedent. We know from talking to people across the country that this idea of distancing from schools and children is already being invoked in different provinces. Like you saw Quebec threatened a bill with distance requirements. We're hearing it from other provinces too. The provincial governments are like, maybe this is a smart thing. So I think people are watching what's happening here, and it will have impact beyond Ontario. So it'd be good to chat about it later and see what happens. Yeah.
I was wondering, did you want to mention any of the other work that HIV Legal Network's doing? I mean, we kind of touched on that before. Other things you've got on the go?
I mean, it's sad. We're hoping to participate in an inquest right now. There's an inquest in a federal prison where 6 men died from fentanyl toxicity. Again, going back to the idea of prisons not being a safe space for people who use drugs or anybody. So that's something we're hoping to participate in early next year. Any intersecting ground of people living with or infected by HIV. So I do a lot of work around with sex workers' rights. We're also involved in a charter challenge right now that's going to the Court of Appeal that's being brought by the Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform, which is a fantastic, mostly sex worker rights groups from across Canada who are challenging these criminal laws against sex work. There's a lot of different things we do.
Yeah, so incredible.
No, I love it. It's great. But it's a hard time to do this work because I think these governments are all just like, they're throwing everything at you, hoping maybe just exhaust us all so you don't have any energy to fight back. There's so much.
Steve Bannon called it flood the zone with shit, which is exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's what Ontario and the federal, well, maybe less the federal government, but Ontario is doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, flood the zone with shit.
I was wondering, would you be interested? I love that statement the HIV Legal Network did on Parkdale. Would you be willing to read it for the podcast?
Sure. I don't remember. You have it?
I can bring it up on my phone.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll have to edit out this little pause, but...
Yeah, we haven't obviously heard back.
Yeah, it's funny. They never responded to my letter. Doug Ford.
Yeah. Well, we
Sylvia and Jones.
Big ones. Like we did a letter with CPHA and like the Canadian Public Health Association and the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario.
Oh, yeah.
And we thought having these big organizations attached to it would make them more responsive, but
they
didn't care.
Yeah, it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
I enjoy writing fiery letters, but it's also like, I know it's just like a way of documenting history. It's like, I know they're gonna have no effect.
Yeah, that's how I feel about a lot of things we do. It's
and
documentation of the resistance.
Yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah, so do we.
Even if it feels ineffective on its, like, on the face of it, I think it's so important And I think that's what this podcast is about too, is like documenting resistance.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, if you're willing to indulge me,
Sure.
I would just love to have this documented
Yeah,
as a resistance.
The whole thing?
If you're open to it.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, why not?
Yeah, okay. This is a statement that the HIV Legal Network put out last month, October 2025, in response to Ford's government's persistent attack on supervised consumption services in this province. We are horrified by the Government of Ontario's decision to force the closure of the consumption and treatment services site at the Parkdale Queen West Community Health Centre, which has been operating for more than 7 years within just 30 days. People will die or suffer preventable injuries because of this decision. The government knows well that it's trampling on the health and human rights of its own constituents. Their attacks on supervised consumption services started back in 2018 when the government placed restrictions on SES and an artificial cap on the number of sites it was willing to fund. This spring, Ontario legislation called the Community Care and Recovery Act forced more than half of operating supervised consumption services in the province to close and made it virtually impossible for new ones to open. This was despite the government's own experts warning that the legislation would result in more deaths and likely violated the Canadian Charter. In particular, the government knew closing sites would put immense pressure on the remaining sites, a reality which has come to fruition over the past 6 months. The government is now using this pressure that they knowingly created to justify dismantling additional life-saving services in the province by deploying their power over social and health services. Funding. They already use it to limit access to needle and syringe programs, despite more than 3 decades of experience proving that such programs prevent HIV and hepatitis C transmission. It is unjustifiable to force sites to privately fundraise to stay open. Healthcare is a province's responsibility, and Canada's highest court has recognized that supervised consumption services are healthcare that save lives. Parkdale Queen West Community Health Centre's consumption and treatment service will not be the last site to be targeted in this way. If this decision stands, people who use drugs will die as the health services they rely on are shuttered. We cannot let this happen. The time is now to send a strong message to the Government of Ontario. We demand that the Government of Ontario safeguard and protect the health and lives of all Ontarians at a time when the province is experiencing preventable toxic drug deaths and injury alongside a crisis of homelessness. We demand that Parkdale Queen West Community Health Centre's site remain open and that the Community Care and Recovery Act be repealed. Ontario must keep funding the site or at the very least allow the centre to operate by a federal exemption. Please email your MPP today to tell them that you believe in evidence, dignity, and life, and that you expect the same from your government representatives.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think it's like something so poetic about the work you do, considering your HIV advocacy network, that you are like the immune system of the body politic.
Oh my God, that's so sweet. Yeah.
So, thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you. It's a privilege to work with there, and it's amazing, like the people we get to meet day to day in this work. It keeps the engine going in spite of the shit flood.
Yeah. I said to one of my friends recently that who's like just getting into activism and is worried about like their lack of experience, said activism is just the art of friendship out loud.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yes, I agree.
It's really so much about connection.
Yeah. And when this government tries to put us all into isolated quarters, I think coming together, joining the Tenants Association, like I went to, there was a rally at Parkdale last week, and just being there amongst people who were all feeling really demoralized, but just the act of being together in community was motivating.
Yeah, it's huge. They try to keep us apart. That's all part of the strategy.
Yeah.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
We're stronger together.
Yes. Yeah.
And thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
For walking.
It was lovely to walk around on a nice fall day.
Yeah, so lovely. And if you need me, call me.
Yes, I will. I mean, I'd love to, if you want to chat once we progress with this case, chat more about it at some point.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Long live the resistance.
Long live the resistance. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, it was great to chat. Thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you.
I want to look up. I know.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Walking Radio. Walking Radio is non-commercial, always free, and is powered by the stories that are too often ignored. I'm Patrick Corvyn. Please join us on our next walk with radio that listens and stories that move.